group leader in the city of Rotterdam, the biggest city of our country, Tim Willigers, who is presenting Flemish. Slootmans, but he will be a little bit later. Kathleen Bury, who is sitting in the back, who is a member of federal parliament, of Belgian federal parliament. And then still have Ralph van der Houten, who is a staff member of the European Identity Group, who is now the third largest group in European Parliament, and after the European elections will be the biggest group in European Parliament. Alexander Van Hoeken, who is a staff member of the Commission of Foreign Affairs in Federal Parliament. In Flemish Parliament. The next one is a staff member of the Commission of Foreign Affairs in Belgian Parliament, Federal Parliament, Jordan de Wachter. And there are also some members of our press, if I can put it that way. It's our friend from Pal News. Who is in the back? Yes, and our friend Dirk Smulders, who is also over there, who is also a lawyer. And then two charming assistants who organize the practical organization of this conference, Nancy Bereken and Annick de Neve, who are members of my personal staff. So, this is the Flemish Belgian delegation, but let's call it the Flemish delegation today. That's important for us, just like Kashmir is important for you, it's important for us that we call it the Flemish delegation. Nevertheless, I think it's now a good moment for you to present your delegation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Philip Dimitro, the first President of the Flemish Parliament, for providing us this opportunity to call our friends across Europe, especially those who are living in exile due to political repression of Pakistan since many years. First of all, I would like to introduce Sardar Shaukat Ali Kashmiri, who is the chairman of the United Kashmir People's National Party. He established this party in 1985 with a few of the colleagues, progressive colleagues, and eventually he had to leave his native state in 1999 after facing two illegal abductions and confinement at the hands of inter-services intelligence of Pakistani military. So he is living in exile in Switzerland since then, and he has traveled across Europe, from Canada to Britain and in Europe. And in the past we have been lobbying in the EU institutions and with the Belgian policymakers too, to highlight the painful situation in our region, especially when Pakistan has designed to use religion as a weapon and terrorism as a policy tool to suppress our people's demands and their wishes and their rights. So Mr. Sardar Shaukat Ali Kashmiri was the first person who challenged Pakistani narrative on using religion and terrorism as a foreign policy tool in Indian administrative part of demarcation. So I would like to request Sardar Shaukat Ali Kashmiri sir to come at the seat. And then we have Mr. Dinesh Qureshi. He is a young professional who established European Foundation for South Asian Studies as a think tank based in Netherlands. And he is effectively working on terrorism, counter-terrorism, human rights, and he has a range of areas working from United Nations Human Rights Council and of course in EU institutions as well. And then please, you also come here on the stage. And then we have Mr. Fadl Rahman Afridi Sahab. He is from Pakhtunkhwa movement. He represents the Pashtun Tahfuz movement, or Pashtun Protection movement. a region that is adjacent to Afghanistan, and it was segregated from Afghanistan in 1905 or around that, when Beirut line was established to divide Pashtun on them, to weaken their power. So after suffering so many years of political repression inflicted by the Pakistani state, now they realize that the Pashtun should be one, and since their lives are at stake because of the proxy war that designed by Pakistan to manipulate democracy and human rights and inclusiveness in Afghanistan. So the Pashtun Office movement is aimed to ask government of Pakistan to stop using their land as a proxy and start using their people as a proxy against their own people, because they think that the Afghan and Pakhtunkhwa people, they are one people, ethnically, linguistically, racially, and even religiously, they are one people, the majority of them. And nevertheless, there is one section in the north, they are Shiites, and other ethnic minorities are also there in the Pakistan. So we are having Mr. Afridi here. I will invite you, just 1 second. And then we have our other friends. Is represented Pashtun Office movement, Mr. Malik Qazi, Mr. Rahmanullah Khan, our friend and colleague, Press Secretary for European Organization, Mr. Sajid Hussain, Mrs. Nargis, you are also welcome in this gathering. Our central spokesperson for United Kashmir People's National Party, Mr. Nasser Aziz Khan, who is there, he is living in exile in Switzerland since long, and he has a credential to speak and to represent our aspirations at United Nations Human Rights Council for a long time. Then we have journalist, Mr. Abdul Adim Shafiq from Switzerland. And I also welcome Mr. Dr. Wolfgang Pitt, is a researcher and a wonderful human being. I met him in a conference in Brussels, and he's a writer, he's an author, and we will also like to interact with him afterwards. And of course, our common friend, Mr. Derek Albright, you are also welcome in this hall. So this is our, and of course, two of our colleagues, I forgot, the President of United Kashmir People's National Party Europe Zone, Mr. Amjad Yusuf, he is living in London, and Mr. Sundar Abbas, he is living in Belgium for a long time. He is the Senior Vice President of our party in Belgium. So he speaks Dutch? Yes, he speaks Dutch. He has a long interaction with the Dutch-speaking community, because he's a businessman, he's an entrepreneur. So this kind of things are, we have this delegation that we hold. Now please start proceeding.
First of all, I would also like to thank Mr. Cartwright, who I know for a long time already. He's the chief editor of Europe Today, to join us today. Thank you very much for being here. So, we'll speak English today. It's obvious, otherwise it would be quite complicated to translate all those languages, but nevertheless. So I think the first speaker can proceed. Who will be the, Mr. Maksud, who is your first speaker?
Just a second, just a second. I have to.
Because we also have two speakers who will join us with the video conference. So
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, thank you. And sorry for the delay. The topic of today is Islamism and versus human rights. And the way the government of Pakistan execute its authority, seems that they are using religion to press human rights. And human rights are very well documented in the United Nations International Declaration for Human Rights, passed on 10th of December 1948. So every year, international community and civil society rights groups commemorates its anniversary as an international convention on human rights. But unfortunately, since Pakistan is signatory to that convention as well, and many others, like International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, Geneva Convention, etc., etc., but they execute and practice as per their wish and their will, not as per international norms and values. So this is the problem with the government of Pakistan since its inception on 14th of August 1947. Just after a couple of months, the legislature of Pakistan introduced resolution of objectives that declare Pakistan as Islamic Republic rather than Republic of Pakistan. And despite creating or giving people a constitution, they start adopting resolutions until 1956. They made a constitution that was abrogated in 1962, and then that constitution was once again abrogated, and another constitution was made and implemented in 1973 that is still enforced. And during all these years, when we explore what Pakistan did with its own people, for instance, the most affected people were the country's minorities, who were 17% at that time, that gradually shrink to 2% today in 75 years. It means Pakistan used religion against its own people, whereas most of the progressive democratic voices in Pakistan claim that the founder of Pakistan, Mr. Jinnah, on his 11th August, he assured all the people of a newly created country, Pakistan, namely Pakistan, that from today you are all equal. You are not Muslims, you are not Christians, you are not Hindus, you are all Pakistanis with equal rights. But that was only a dream. Not only for the minorities, but for everyone. The people who were supported by the British after 1857 Freedom War were given the charge to run the country. So there were feudal lords, there were military generals, and there were mullah, the clergy. They created an unholy alliance against their own people just after the creation of that country. So this was a somehow small introduction, and now I would like to invite our first speaker, the man speaker from our side, Sadar Chaudhary Kashmiri, for his deliberations for today's conference. The mic is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, member of the parliament, civil society, journalists, think tank, academia, and political activists and leaders. I welcome you all and thankful to Mr. Philip Devender, first president of the Flemish parliament, and Jamil Nassour for organizing this conference and providing this opportunity to share our concern with you. Mr. Jamil Maksood give you a little brief on the topic. Dear friends, we deeply concerned and would like to draw this August gathering towards serious violations of human rights in the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, where the people of Pakistani administrators are actually, it is very much occupied. It is colonized by the Pakistan, not just administrator. We can say under India, that is the administrator by the India, because India came into Kashmir through a treaty, whereas Pakistan invaded Kashmir, and all those who were not subscribed the ideology of Islam, they were forced to leave this area, which is known as Azad Kashmir. Actually, it is not Azad, but it is very much occupied. And Gilgit-Baltistan. So at this moment, you cannot find a single person in whole under Pakistani occupation, whether it's Gilgit-Baltistan or POK, a Hindu or a Sikh or a Christian, because they were all forced to leave this area. And then actually our rulers, Maharaja Hari Singh, because we were very small in number, the army. That army was unable to defend the lives, liberty and property of the chief of state of Jammu Kashmir. And he actually requested to the newly formed government, Indian government, to help military. But unfortunately at that time, India was also engaged with different princely states. But even then, India failed and sent the army to a treaty that is called the Treaty of Accession. Although it was at that time promised by the Indian founding fathers that we are going to Kashmir to protect the life, liberty and the property of the Kashmir. Because seriously, many people, irrespective of their religion, the invaded forces killed them, raped the women, and plundering the resources, and also looting. Then Indian army came and actually pushed back the invaders. That was some of the Pakistani regular army and some religiously motivated group from different parts of Pakistan, especially from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Then, after intervention of the world community, it was ceasefire, and still we are divided. But that area where the Indian army came and pushed back the invaders. So at that time, this time, a major chunk of the land and people is under Indian administration. Our party, United Kashmir People's National Party, believe that state of Jammu Kashmir is one political entity. We have share land and culture and the history. So, in our view, and according to the United Nations resolution on 13th August 1948, Pakistan has no locus standi on Kashmir issue. But through manipulation and Cold War era policy, now Pakistan become a party. But in our view, Pakistan has no locus standi on Kashmir, and it is not party, it is a simply illegal occupier. And through religious exploitation, Pakistan promoting some motivated religious people, and they radicalize, they try to radicalize our people, and this area which is known as POK, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, used the land as an launching pad for the terrorist activities on the other part. In Constitution, it is not Constitution. It's a joke with the people who lived under Pakistan. It's called an Act, Act 1974. It was imposed by the Pakistani federal government, and that Constitution or that Act did not allow us to take part in the election because we did not subscribe the ideology of Pakistan, nor we believe that we have nothing to do with Pakistan. But Pakistan forcefully asked us, we should give the oath, give the certificate of the loyalty with the Pakistan, then you can take part. Whereas we are not subscribing the two-nation theory ideology because it's a totally communal based, and we believe pluralism. And the other thing, that we are not constitutionally or historically part and parcel of the Pakistan. So Pakistan did not allow any person who believe reunification of the Kashmir, who do not subscribe the ideology of accession with Pakistan, he considered to be a terrorist, traitor of Pakistan. Whereas according to the Pakistani Constitution, section 257, Pakistani Constitution recognizes that this is a disputed area and it is not part of Pakistan. But through different means and a separate act imposed on the people of Kashmir and over rights, basic rights, over freedom of expression, all are compromised. And if anybody who promotes the secular cause, because Kashmir was a secular, it is a multicultural and multi-religious state. And the people of Gilgit Baltistan, they are also suffered too much, and they have no such kind of a rule of business with Pakistan, and illegally Pakistan plundering the resources of the state, and especially the Gilgit Baltistan people who raised the voices for their basic rights. Pakistan actually implement a Schedule 4. Before it was the world community who forced Pakistan that all the terrorists should be in the fourth schedule and they should mind. But Pakistan, that schedule actually under the world community pressure passed through the parliament, but it is applied only on those people who are actually promoting secularism or promoting the basic rights concept, peace. Pakistan, at this moment, all the people from Gilgit Baltistan who are promoting human rights are in the Schedule 4. They kept their freedom of movement, their freedom of expression, everything has been compromised. And only it is a state of Pakistan, there the religious minority have no any say. Even through the parliament, there is a one sect which claim that they are the Muslims, but the parliament declared them, the NDR, maybe you people know or not, but they declared that NDRs are non-Muslims, and now they are also not safe, and ultimately they were forced to break completely silence, because constitutionally they are not allowed to practice their faith. And like Hindus, they force them to leave or to accept Islam. Especially in Sindh, many Hindu women were kidnapped first, then declared them that, oh, this lady is actually accept Islam and married with one Muslim boy. And lately, she was forced. And actually, simply, I would like to say that all the religious minorities in Pakistan actually suppressed by the majority and the state. It is the state who used some of the radical elements, especially the Islam, against the others, suppressed the sand voices. So in Pakistan, there is no democracy, it's a mockery, the name of the democracy. Maybe you people read in the newspapers. So our situation is very worse, and I am very much thankful to you to organize this gathering and listen us, because I have 6-page speech, but I think it is little bit lengthy. It's better that I will share with you after this conference, but I think I must be stopped here. And again, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you have any notes or papers, misschien kan iemand iets doen aan de echo. Mensen aan de techniek. Ja. If you have any notes or papers, just share them with us. We can copy them and we will spread them to all of our participants. Mag ik erop wijzen? Deze man is in Pakistan tot 2 keer toe door de regering ontvoerd geworden. Hij heeft meer dan een jaar in een detentiekamp gezeten waar hij gemarteld en gefolterd is geweest tot wanneer hij het land is uitgewezen. Hij woont nu al 9 jaar in Zwitserland als politiek vluchteling, omdat hij het land niet meer in mag. Dat gewoon even ertoe. So, we can...
Now it's your turn to call the other two gentlemen on the stage.
Well, we don't have prepared any speeches or whatever. We will just give the possibility to our delegation to ask questions. If they want, they can ask questions, but we are here to listen to you, to share your experiences, not
Okay, that's fine.
to trouble you with our...
Now, it's without wasting any time, I would like to invite Sadar Nasser Aziz Khan at the stage, and then Mr. Fadl Rahman Afridi, the president of Kabul Institute of Strategic Studies, to please on stage. So, both the gentlemen are arriving at their positions. They are going to take their positions soon. I would like to invite Mr. Junaid Qureshi, the Executive Director of South Asian Studies. Now the mic is coming. Please start.
Thank you, Mr. Maksud, and thank you for organizing this conference along with the European colleagues of the Flemish Parliament. It's a privilege to be here and share this stage where we can discuss our issues. So you all have done us a very big favor, so thank you for that. Mr. Shaukat Kashmiri has explained very well the history of Jammu and Kashmir, and it is unfortunate that I'm sitting here and I have to introduce myself as someone from Indian administered Kashmir, and as Mr. Shaukat Kashmiri said, he is someone from Pakistani administered Kashmir, while it is one single entity, and we shouldn't be introducing ourselves from two different parts. And as he alluded to was that, let's not forget that, things like the line of control, the UN resolutions, Indian administered part of Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistani administered part of Jammu and Kashmir, the Shimla Agreement, statehood for Gilgit-Baltistan, Article 370 of India's Constitution, all these things would not have existed had the 22nd of October 1947 not happened, which is when the Pakistani army, along with its tribals, which we call Lashkars, religiously motivated people, invaded Jammu and Kashmir. And instead of going into the history of what happened there, I would just like to present you with historical evidences of how the people of Jammu and Kashmir experienced this invasion. So Father Shanks of the Mill Hill Mission, who was the principal of the St. Joseph Degree College in Baramulla, where these tribals came, and was an eyewitness to the carnage, in his first-hand account brought out the sort of brutality that the Lashkars indulged in. He wrote, "The tribesmen, great wild black beasts, came shooting their way down from the hills on both sides of the town. They climbed over the hospital walls from all sides. The first group burst into a ward firing at the patients. A 12-year-old nurse tried to protect a Muslim patient whose baby had just been born. She was shot dead first. The patient was next. Mother Superior Attitude rushed into the ward, knelt over her, and was attacked and robbed. The assistant mother saw a tribesman point a rifle and jumped in front of her. A bullet went through her heart. At the moment, Colonel Dykes, who had assured the people they would not be attacked, raced from his room a few yards along the terrace to get the Mother Superior out of danger, shouting at the tribesman as he ran." The problem is that this historically is called Operation Gulmarg, which happened, which is the first armed attempt of Pakistan, which heavily relied on external mercenaries to seize Jammu and Kashmir. And in the last 73 years, it has used the same template to destroy Jammu and Kashmir multiple times over. And as we are here at the European platform discussing Jammu and Kashmir, one thing is very intriguing. The terminology that has evolved over the years in the West to describe Jammu and Kashmir is very intriguing. Of course, as mentioned earlier, this terminology may have suited the strategic interests of some of the powerhouses of the late 1940s. But the international community uses the terms Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan-administered Jammu and Kashmir. And this has been happening since the early days of the Jammu and Kashmir conflict. The use of two separate terms for the two illegally split parts of Jammu and Kashmir have served to perpetuate the myth of there being more than one single Jammu and Kashmir, the one as it existed when the British left, and the equating of the legal title holder with the aggressor and land grabber has not only humored Pakistan's legally unjustifiable position, but has also allowed and emboldened it to agitate a cause that has heaped misery on the people of Jammu and Kashmir and served only Pakistani purposes and interests. And coming to the human rights situation in Jammu and Kashmir, especially in the part which again, as we call it in Pakistan, occupied Kashmir, I would like to quote a few a few numbers from data. Is that in Pakistan administered Jammu and Kashmir, or Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir, there is very little space for Kashmiri aspirations in the political discourse. And that's not, I am not saying that. Freedom House noted in its recent 2021 report on Pakistani Kashmir, the territory is administered as two territories, so-called Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. Each has an elected assembly and government with limited autonomy, but they lack the parliamentary representation and other rights of Pakistani provinces, and Pakistani federal institutions have predominant influence over security, courts, and most important policy matters. politics within the two territories are carefully managed to promote the idea of Kashmir's eventual accession to Pakistan. Freedoms of expression and association and any political activity deemed contrary to Pakistan's policy on Kashmir are restricted. This report, which is from the Freedom House and it's a year old, rated the region as not free and gave it 9 out of 40 points in political rights and 19 out of 60 in civil liberties. The combined count out of 100 in this Freedom House report for this part of Jammu and Kashmir has been 28. And they go even further, they made a reflection on the last year's elections in Jammu and Kashmir in the Pakistani part, administered part of Jammu and Kashmir. And the institution says, widespread violence and allegations of poll rigging by the opposition. Pakistani Prime Minister's party, Imran Khan at that moment, won 25 out of 45 elected seats. And it's very remarkable in the history of Jammu and Kashmir. Every single election in Azad Jammu and Kashmir, so-called Azad Jammu and Kashmir, has been won by the party in power in Islamabad. Never ever has the elections there been won by a different party, let alone a regional party. And the Freedom House attributes this phenomenon to the institutional benefits that accrue to the incumbent party in Pakistan with regard to these elections. And I'm not going to compare, but as you might know, elections also happen in the Indian administered part of Jammu and Kashmir. And I guess never ever has the party who's in power in New Delhi been in power in that part. It has always been regional parties who have been part. And again, going a bit further on this Freedom House report, it also talks about the atrocities that are meted out to residents of Pakistan-administered Jammu and Kashmir to every day. The report notes, and I quote, the powers of the elected chief executives in Pakistan-administered Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan are limited by the fact that a Pakistani Prime Minister, the Pakistani Minister for Kashmir Affairs in Gilgit-Baltistan, and through them, the Federal Civil Services, exercise effective control over government operations in both territories. As in Pakistan, federal military and intelligence agencies also play a powerful role in governance and policy making, and these areas are subject to laws that curb freedom of expression, particularly regarding reporting the political status of the territory. Even in academia, there are acute sensitivities around the issue of the constitutional status and debate or materials questioning Pakistan's claim over Kashmir. And it went further, adding, and I'll just take a few minutes more, that the intelligence agencies of Pakistan, and again I'm not saying this is the Freedom House report saying this, maintain a prominent and intrusive presence in both the territories. Discussion of political or religious views carries significant risks, and the authorities have increased their monitoring of social media and severely punish expression of anti-Pakistan or separatist opinions. It goes further by saying torture, as Mr. Shaukat Kashmiri firsthand has experienced by being kidnapped in that area twice and being tortured and being confined into a solitary confinement for a year. Torture and deaths in custody at the hands of security forces have been reported, especially for independent supporters and activists. Separately, armed extremist groups devoted largely to attack Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir operate from Pakistan-administered Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan and have links with factions based in Pakistan and Afghanistan. What I want to end with is that we all, and especially the powers that may be in the West, like in this parliament, should start realizing that the real tragedy is that Pakistan even today believes in the same policy and adopts the same methods as it did in 1947 on the 22nd of October. And the bigger tragedy is that the West keeps getting fooled by them, by the Pakistanis telling the West that they are the only option in the region, that they are the only option who can stop terrorism in Afghanistan. Well, it has proven not to be so. 20 years down the line and the Taliban are again ruling Afghanistan. So, apart from the fact that we as Kashmiris are very thankful to you for organizing and giving us this platform, we also hope that it will take us somewhere and you can learn from the real policies on the ground and effectively reform and form your policies regarding this region, and especially towards countries which not only promote terrorism but which sponsor terrorism, which subjugate and oppress people's freedom of rights. And in that sense, not only of the Kashmiri people, but in the same sense as Mr. Afridi later will say, of the Pashtun people and other historically independent, sovereign, culturally different nations living in that area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dinesh, for enlightening us on various aspects pertaining to the region and to the state of Kashmir. And without any further delay, I would like to invite Mr. Fadl Rahman Afridi, who is the President of Khyber Institute of Strategic Studies. So he will enlighten us on strategic issues of that region, people, vis-a-vis Afghanistan and Pakistan. And so the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Philippe, Vice President of the Flemish Parliament and members of the Flemish and European Parliament, my colleagues from PTN, and Jamil Masood, UKPNP. It's really an honor to speak on this important issue at this August occasion in front of such important personalities. I'll discuss the issue of Islamism versus human rights in Pakistan from Pashtun ethnic minorities' perspective, living on both sides of the controversial Julian line. On Kashmir, our colleagues Sardar Shaukat Ali Kashmiri and Junaid Qureshi, they have discussed in details, so I'll discuss the Pashtun perspective here. Right from the creation of the artificial and convoluted Pakistan, Pashtun ethnic minority have been the target of worst kind of Islamism imposed on them by the Punjabi establishment. We Pashtuns have paid a very heavy price due to radical Islam and have been kept away from civilization and modern day education so that we can easily be influenced and used as gun fodder by fighting other people's war in our close vicinity and far away regions of the world. Pakistan, which is not a nation, rather a country of completely different groups of people, very cleverly used Islamic identity as label, as repressive cultural tool to undermine our Pashtun identity. Robbed of our Pashtun identity, Pashtuns, tribesmen, were used under Islamic label by the Islamic Republic of Pakistan in attacking the present Pakistani occupied Kashmir, which resulted in gross human rights violations of the Kashmiri people. Successful in this operation, Punjab Regiment, or Islamic Republic of Pakistan, then used Pashtuns against other nations like Balochs in Balochistan province and Afghans during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Rather than using Pashtun nationalism to counter Soviets, Pakistan used radical Islamic ideology to fight a long and costly jihad which resulted in the killing and injuring of millions and displacement of millions of Afghans. More than 40,000 madrasas were established to radicalize innocent young Pashtuns to fight foreign wars. Education curriculum was imported from a foreign country to radicalize Pashtuns in Pakistan. The first human rights violation of Pashtun ethnic minority was committed on 12th August 1948 at Babra, when more than 666 innocent Pashtuns were brutally murdered and more than 1,800 were injured by Pakistani security forces just for raising their voice for their rights. After Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, these fanatics who were used in Afghan jihad were left to fight each other, which resulted in the destruction of Kabul and the whole of Afghanistan. Pakistan, not satisfied with so much destruction and miseries of Pashtuns, again created another monster called Taliban in the year 1992. Taliban were used by Pakistan to completely rob Pashtuns of their identity and history. The terrorists from around the world, including Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, were brought to tribal areas of Pakistan and Afghanistan. Taliban were responsible for the worst type of human rights violations in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and Pashtuns were the first victims of radical Islamic ideology. After 9/11, the state of Pakistan double gamed both Americans and Pashtuns. While Pakistan provided sanctuaries to Afghan Talibans in Pakistan army garrisons, Americans were robbed of billions of dollars in the so-called War on Terror. Instead of targeting Taliban and Al-Qaeda, Pakistani military killed thousands of innocent Pashtuns by using F-16 jet bombers, helicopter gunships, and artillery. More than 200,000 houses and 25,000 shops and markets and infrastructure of ex-Fata and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa were razed to ground, while millions of Pashtuns were internally displaced. Pakistan Army committed war crimes and crimes against humanity by killing 75,000 innocent Pashtuns. When Pakistan says that 75,000 Pakistanis have been killed in the so-called War on Terror, somebody should ask them who were those Pakistanis. Those Pakistanis were only Pashtuns. And the billions of dollars, $33 billion that the Pakistanis earned, those billions of dollars were used in Punjab for the development of Punjab. So that is how the Pashtuns have been used by the Pakistani authorities. And 32,000 Pashtuns have been forcibly disappeared. We are still stuck between Taliban fanaticism to our west and Pakistani Punjabi militarism in the west, in the east. It is to be noted that General Musharraf, former Chief of Army Staff and the President of Pakistan, has accepted the fact in his book that he sold more than 5 was used as a political tool in a systematic manner through educational curriculum, through establishment of madrasas in every nook and corner of the country, the promotion of terrorist organizations in the country and abroad, and even the constitution was used as a tool to promote Islamism in the country and target liberal, progressive, ethnic and religious minorities, and violated the basic fundamental rights of the civilians in Pakistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fazlur Rahman Reddy, for covering the entire geopolitical situation and state of human rights and its impact on the daily life of the people in the region, Afghanistan. Pakistan introduced blasphemy laws in 1973 Constitution, first to marginalize, sideline, Ahmadiyya Muslim community. And the same clauses like 295C, 295A, ABC, they were lately used against Christian community, Hindu, Sikhs, and every day before yesterday, 2 Sikhs were targeted and killed in Peshawar, the capital of the same region where Mr. Afridi hails from. And in Sindh province, it is everyday practice that young Hindu girls are kidnapped and they are forced to marry with 50, 60 and even 70 years old Sunni Muslims under the state patronage. And in the case of Asiya Masih, Shafqat Emmanuel and many others, the international community has witnessed that until the European Parliament did not approve a resolution, Pakistani courts did not move to release those innocents who were languishing in jail for 7 years. And all of a sudden they were released, that they are not proven guilty and they are innocent. So this is the state of judicial activism in Pakistan. And it is very, according to many international organizations that keep watching on these issues. So, Article 295C, under that article, no one has given fair trial at any court of law, at a session court, high court, or even at Supreme Court. Most of the time, it is used to set the personal scope with the fellow countrymen. For instance, if any person from minority community came to Europe, establish his house, or buy a good vehicle, oh, how come you have got this house? How come you purchased this vehicle? You want to compete us? No. Very second they will live it out. Oh, he committed blasphemy. He abused our profit. How come two people can abuse someone who is idealized by 98 people in the same hall, in the same place, in the same society? So it means the blasphemy laws are used as a weapon against their own people. They have the same ID, they have the same identification outside Pakistan. Outside Pakistan, they are all called as a Pakistanis, whatever their ethnic or religious identification is. And our demand with the international community, with the policymakers at all levels, that these clauses should be abolished in 21st century. And everybody should be treated equal before the law. Nobody should have a right to blame and then kill. Even there is a case that Ahmadi professor doctor was killed in the courtroom last year. The policeman gave his pistol to a young boy like 20 years old, that he is Ahmadiyya, he is a non-Muslim, kill him. And he was killed, just in front of the judge. And the boy went free, that he killed a non-Muslim. So this is the state of justice in Pakistan. And we believe that until there is no fair trial for anyone, the practice of witch hunt against political enemies, civil rights activists, minorities rights activists would continue. So now I would like to invite Mr. Saddam Nasser Aziz Khan, who is the central spokesperson of United Kashmir People's National Party, a prominent human rights defender, and representative of NGOs at United Nations Human Rights Council. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good day, respected ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Philip De Winter, President, Flemish Parliament, Mr. Jamil Masood. Special thanks to you for organizing this event, and everybody who is present here. We are grateful to you for your participation and your input in this very important conference. As we are gathered here to highlight the miseries and the problems. In 1947, Pakistan was created in the name of Islam on the basis of religion. At that time, our state of Jammu and Kashmir, was an independent state, and our legitimate ruler Maharaja Hari Singh, he decided neither to join India nor Pakistan. But unfortunately, Pakistan invaded on 22nd October 1947 and forcibly divided our state. Since 1947, we are divided, and people are suffering on both sides of the so-called line of control. After the division, Pakistan gave the name of our areas where we belong. Azad Kashmir, Azad means free, free is mean independent. But unfortunately, we are far from freedom. We are ruled by Pakistani land officers, always imposed by Pakistan, especially from Punjab. And local authorities have no say, no authority. They are on the mercy of the Pakistani establishment and the government in Islamabad. On the international arena, we have been listening that Pakistan is the champion of the right to self-determination of the people of Kashmiris. But it is very selective. Pakistan always promotes extremism and fundamentalist groups. They train them, they send them to Indian side of Kashmir, especially in Srinagar. They never speak about Jammu, about Ladakh, and she is not ready to give the rights to people of under its administration in so-called Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. Pakistan bifurcated Gilgit-Baltistan from so-called Azad Kashmir in 1947, changed its demographic to get the desired result in that region. In case if there will be a plebiscite or referendum for the future status of our state, that Pakistan will get the like-minded vote from Gilgit-Baltistan and Pakistani occupied Kashmir. In Pakistani occupied Kashmir, extremist groups are running freely. They are free hand from the authorities. They are recruiting people. Recently, Pakistani occupied Prime Minister nominated a person who idealized Hamid Gul as his master, who is the father of the Taliban, General Hamid Gul. He was the chief of the intelligence agency of Pakistan, who trained Pashtuns and innocent people across Pakistan, Pakistani occupied Kashmir. They sent them to Afghanistan, in Kashmir, in other part of the world. If we see the footprints of the all major attacks, whether it is 9/11 or Madrid bombing, in London bombing, everywhere you will see the footprints coming from Pakistan. These people got training from there. With the international community, she claimed that she is the ally on war on terror. She is the ally of NATO. She is fighting against Taliban. But we have seen that when Taliban came into power, Pakistan said we defeated United States, Western countries in Afghanistan. Now our children ruling Afghanistan, our assets are there. Same is happening in Kashmir, so-called Pakistani occupied Kashmir, Gilgit-Baltistan, and each and every same person who is believe in peace, harmony, coexistence, is threatened by the state agencies, and systematically one narrative is built by Pakistan that we are superior. These extremist groups are superior. They have right to rule everybody. They have right to impose their agenda to other people. We request international community through this August gathering that there was invasion on 22nd October 1947. Usually, when they are powerful countries invade other countries, democratic, progressive people, they stand with the oppressed people. But in our case, this is unfortunate that since 1947 we are divided. We are forcibly divided. Pakistan is exploiting our natural resources. She is not ready to listen. She is not ready to listen our miseries and problems. She is not ready to allow us to take part in the election. Before applying for any job or contest election, we have to submit a loyalty, a oath of loyalty to Pakistan, that we are loyal to Pakistan, we will remain loyal to Pakistan, and we believe that state of Jammu and Kashmir should be acceded to Pakistan. Such kind of discrimination we are facing in Pakistan. And at international level, people used to come in European Parliament, in United States, in United Nations, everywhere, and they are saying that, oh, Kashmiri, they are Muslim, they want to join Pakistan. This is not the reality. State of Jammu and Kashmir is a multi-religious, multi-cultural, multi-lingual state, and we believe in peace, harmony, and coexistence. We don't believe in the religion that we are Muslim, we will join Pakistan. We are Muslim, but we are progressive, we believe in humanity. We don't believe that Pakistan impose its agenda in the name of Kashmir, in the name of religion. We have respect for each and every person. Religion is a private matter of everybody. It is between God, Allah, and that person. I have no right to impose my religion, my ideology on any other person, and same should be in reverse. And state affair and religion should be separated. In Pakistani occupied Kashmir, progressive, secular, pro-national parties have no right to propagate their ideology. They are not allowed to take part in the elections, and extremists, they are promoting their agenda, they are distributing their literature, they are getting donation from the people, they are fully supported and protected by the state. Through this August gathering, we request all of you that we are the voiceless and deprived people. We have no representation in the Pakistani institution or in Pakistani National Assembly, in Pakistani Senate, and this is the only area in the democratic society we can raise our voices. And if somebody raises voices, its grievances, share with international community, Pakistan level them and is very much determined to our ideology, our cause, and we will continue our struggle. I once again thank you, organizers, for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nasser Aziz Khan, for inviting all the panelists and guests here. The different dimensions of Pakistani state security policies, and especially targeting ethnic minorities also in Jammu and Kashmir. One of a community which is known as a Pandit community in Kashmir Valley, they were targeted, and still many other ethnic groups like Sikhs and Hindus are targeted every day. As Pakistan is sending Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Harkat al-Ansar, Tehreek al-Mujahideen, Hizb al-Mujahideen, and many other local terrorists across the line of control. And Pakistan is creating such a hostile condition in our part of Jammu and Kashmir, where India could be compelled to construct a big war to permanently divide Jammu and Kashmir, which we of course oppose, and we want the unification of entire state of Jammu and Kashmir. And we also propose that all the regions should have equal status in Jammu, in Srinagar, in Ladakh, in Gilgit-Baltistan, and in other so-called Pakistani Kashmir. Like a federal structure, where regional governments should have complete autonomy, except defense, currency, and foreign affairs. So this is what we are striving for. And for Pakistan, from a long time, we are demanding that Pakistan should abolish blasphemy laws and should treat all its citizens equally. It is 21st century, it is not 19th century, it is not 1947. So time has traveled, they should evolve, and they should not blackmail international community in the name of religious minorities. So this is what we demand, this is what we believe, and this is what we think that international community should support and resolve of the respect of human rights and all human rights, not a selected human rights, all human rights. In today's world, clean drinking water is a fundamental human right which is not available to the majority of the people. A clean drinking water, that is a very basic necessity. And primary health care is not available. Jobs are not available. Instead of formulating a drastic industrial policy, the state of Pakistan has introduced drastic religious policy. Instead of establishing industries in the country to overcome unemployment, they have established religious seminaries to radicalize more and more young people, to put them into the industry of jihad. In India, in Afghanistan, in Kashmir, even in Europe. They have one big group in United Kingdom, maybe Mr. Gary Cartwright is very well aware about Hizbul Tahrir. And it is supported, it is created by a Pakistani guy, Anjam Chaudhary. He is a Pakistani guy who is demanding Sharia law in England, in London. Yes. So they are everywhere to create such a menace in the civilized society. They are real threat to the civilized societies, civilized world, and to those who support human rights. All of them. So now we have 20 minutes and 40 minutes left for today's session. And as you said, there will be a Q&A session. So we will also open the floor for Q&A session, and before doing that,
I would like to propose that the Vice President of the Commission of Foreign Affairs talks a little bit about our point of view and also can give a summary of our questions that we have. And then afterwards, I would give the floor to all the other participants to ask the questions they want. And then we can conclude.
I think due to the time I will have to be short, but I want to thank you all for your presentations and for telling us interesting, sad and sometimes terrible stories about Pakistan. You should know that most of the people in Flanders and also in Europe do not know a lot of this issue. And that's why it's very important to have you here to talk about human rights in Pakistan and, well, even the possibilities of political pressure everywhere in the world. I think that's very important. Islam and human rights, that's oil and water. So this conference can help telling the story and bringing it to a larger audience. And people should know that when Islam takes power, human rights are abolished. And Pakistan is a perfect and sad enough tragic example of this fact. So I would like to look at the audience, give the audience the floor for some questions. So if there are some questions, I'm happy to. I see that Sam has a question.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you all for this very interesting day so far. I've learned a lot, and it's a matter that is very important to us, since we are also having a lot of Muslims in Europe and having to conquer Islamization. What I'm curious to ask you is the role of India for Kashmir. Since India is a nuclear power, just like Pakistan, and since India, of course, has experienced one of the biggest genocides, maybe even the biggest genocide in history, between the 13th in the 17th century, 500 years, there were killed more or less 50 to 80 million Hindus by Islamic Jihad. So I think India very well knows what Islam and Islamic Jihad is. So my question is, what do you expect from India? What role should India play in the matter of Kashmir?
So I think Mr. Kashmir is most appropriate person to reply this question.
Thank you. Actually, we have the treaty with the India, and so India has a local standby, and the promises with India, promises with the Kashmiris from the India is to reunify the state. But unfortunately, and to protect the life, liberty, and the property of the Kashmiris, but unfortunately, India has failed to protect the life, liberty, and property of the Kashmiris. And still, the terrorist activity is continue in that part where Indian administrator. But now we have no democracy there, although India is the largest democratic country. But in that part, which is known as state of Jammu Kashmir, there is no democracy. So we ask them that you should treat whole area equally and give them the democratic setup. Last 3 years there is a corner rush. It is in a democratic country, governor rule. So it's not good for India. Second thing, it is the end. At least we ask India should fulfill the ingredients of accession. It is the Indian duty to reunify whole state of Jammu Kashmir. But unfortunately, India is not looking POK, not looking Gambit Pakistan, and even India did not raise any voice in favor of these areas which are illegally under illegal occupation of Pakistan. So I think India has not fulfilled their promises. So that is the Indian promise with the Kashmiris to reunify the Kashmir. But India has failed.
And why you think India is failing?
Because killings are going on by the hands of terrorists, and still it is everywhere the terrorism is continuing. So India has failed to curb the terrorism in the state of Jammu Kashmir. Okay. India has failed to reunify the state of Jammu Kashmir. But it's the prime duty of it. When India came into Kashmir with this pledge that all the invaders should push back. But now India is trying to, this line of control is permanent. This is our grievances. And even Pakistan everywhere promoting and projecting his, and protecting his terrorist activities in the name of the state of Jammu Kashmir, whereas we the people who are living under Pakistan, India never ever say any words regarding over human rights. Whereas India has a title and a treaty. So miserably, I think. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much for these first-hand insights in a question that has been going on for very long. How do you assess the risk of a united Kashmir to become an Islamic state?
Actually, it is also, I would like to respond to this question. Or I think Mr. Junaid Peshi would respond on the question, or gentleman, that how do you see the risk of Kashmir becoming an Islamic state? You have to narrate the demographic composition.
To be honest, first we will have to look at the probability of Kashmir becoming an independent country while being a in the midst of three nuclear powers, which is Pakistan, India, and China. But let's, for the sake of argument, say we get there. In that particular situation, I would not be afraid of Kashmir becoming an Islamic state. The reason for that is that Kashmir has a very long history. Gentleman was talking about the history of India. Kashmir's history goes back 5,000 years, which is longer than India's history. And Kashmir has always been a melt pot of pluralism. There are Hindus in Kashmir, there are Buddhists in Kashmir, there are Muslims in Kashmir. And until the time that terrorism was exported from Pakistan into Jammu and Kashmir, all these people lived together. In the sense that we Kashmiris, we celebrate Hindu festivals in Kashmir, and Hindus in Kashmir celebrate Muslim festivals in Kashmir as well. One of the Mughal emperors, the one who built Taj Mahal, Shah Jahan, once visiting Kashmir said, and I quote him, he said, "I do not understand what kind of Muslims live here. They celebrate Hindu festivals and they look like them." So Kashmir is a melt pot of pluralism. So it has no history of religious fundamentalism. It only started in the early 90s when this was exported, and that was mostly mercenaries. No Kashmiri not many Kashmiris were involved in terrorism. There were some boys who were indoctrinated and started this, but it was mostly run from the other side of the border and run by mercenaries. So I would say I absolutely see no risk in Kashmir becoming, because we don't have a history of being any type of fundamentalist interpretation to any religion. Even when Kashmir was mostly, when it had Hindu kings, it wasn't fundamentalist run. When it was run by the Dogra dynasty before it was separated, which was again a Hindu ruling the majority of Muslims, it had no fundamentalist angle towards his ruling. The Dogra ruler of Kashmir implemented liberties and rights for all the people of Kashmir, so not only for his community, which is the Hindus. And even during Muslim rule in Kashmir, there was no fundamentalist angle to it. So it is a very pluralistic society. So I don't see any risk to that.
I would like to ask a question to this person, because
Mr. Fadl Ramalati.
yes, you represent a minority who lives on the border of Pakistan, next to Afghanistan, and of course a lot of Europeans did not understand, and I didn't either, how it was possible for the Taliban to survive during about 15-20 years of American occupation, military occupation of Afghanistan. Still, only a year ago there was this power switch in Afghanistan where the Taliban take over, hostile takeover in full strength. And they were able to occupy the whole country in a few days. They were very powerful, also military. This was only possible with support of Pakistan. And I think it was in your region that these Taliban military units could survive, could have training, could have shelter also. Could you talk a little bit about this? Because this is also important for us. Taliban is a threat. And together with, I have also the impression that together with the Islamist forces in Pakistan, Jamaat al-Islam, Islamic State, Al-Qaeda and others who are still supported by Pakistan, there is also radicalization going on. Now Taliban is in charge, is in power in Afghanistan. There is also radicalization going on in Pakistan because of the Taliban taking over. What's your point of view about all this?
Yeah, it's a really very important question you have raised. When my friend Junaid Qureshi was saying that there is no chance of radicalization of Kashmir, about more than 40 actually at present, I'll go into details why it's happening. Even now, the Pakistani state is in dialogue with the TTP, the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, to bring them back to the ex-Fatah and the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, to give them all the powers and create a Sharia-like situation. But then in our areas again, they are bringing them again. There is alarming increase in the target killings and enforced disappearances of the progressive and liberal Pashtuns, just as it had happened 23 years ago. So now it's happening again and in the front of the international community, and nobody is asking the question why it's happening. So first it's Pakistani state which is responsible for radicalization of Pashtuns on both sides of the Duran line. Another important thing in Afghanistan, it has always been the case that a small minority has been given powers, and the majority of Pashtuns, or the most important majority in Afghanistan, they were kept uneducated, and they have not been given any development opportunities. They have been in the rural areas. They were the most powerful in terms of fighting and other things, but other communities like Tajiks, Hazaras were given all the powers in Afghanistan. So that imbalance created tensions always between the three communities, and that was also the responsibility of the international community. That Pashtuns were not given their due rights. Pashtuns were not given their actual rights which they were supposed to have. So Pakistan trained the Taliban. We know about that there was Quetta Shura, there was Shower Shura, and Haqqani Network, which is the most important power now in Afghanistan. They have been supported by Pakistan, and those thousands of madrasas. And even now there is another trend which is really very dangerous. Now they have started creating women madrasas in our region. So up till now, our women have been saved from radicalization in their houses. But now in every village you will see a women madrasa. So our women have been now, they have started radicalizing our women. So it's even dangerous than what has happened up till now. So I think it's Pakistan, and there are some international powers who are responsible for this radicalization. Maybe there will be another war in the region, a proxy war, maybe against China, against Russia, I don't know. But the Pashtuns who are considered as terrorists, they are the victims of terrorism because they have been used, our infrastructure, our education system has been kept, in the manner so that they can easily be used as gun fodder, they can easily be radicalized, because in those madrasas, the students who go to those madrasas, their parents, they don't have their livelihood. They cannot, rear up their children normally. So they send it to madrasas, and after those mullahs who had been given, the curriculum by the Pakistani authorities, even these madrasas have been run under the education system of Pakistan, Pakistani Ministry of Education. So it is in a systematic manner, the Pashtuns have been radicalized with the consent of the international community. Pakistan cannot do it alone. Pakistan doesn't have the resources to do it. There are other powers, international powers, who are responsible for this radicalization, and it can only be stopped when the Pashtuns in Afghanistan have been given the same opportunities, and even in Pakistan they are developed and they are given also the education and investments. Thank you.
I would also say that in Jammu Kashmir we had mysticist traditions of Islam, not just Wahhabi or Salafi Islam or political Islam. We have Gadika tribes, the prominent journalist and the editor-in-chief of EU Today. He is our oldest friend from 2009. So we have a great acquaintance, reading and reading with the members of the European Parliament. So if you have to say something or you want to add something, you are welcome. Thank you.
I would actually like to raise one sort of issue, one question. Mr. Chair, you mentioned the weaponisation of blasphemy laws, the use of blasphemy laws as a weapon. This is something that I've been considering for a long time, and I've come to a conclusion I didn't want to come to, but nobody can offer me any other alternatives. You'll note that if memory serves correct, some 66 people over the last couple of decades have been killed who have been accused of blasphemy, but not one person has ever been executed by the state for blasphemy, despite the fact that blasphemy against the prophet is a capital offence. And if memory serves correct, a young boy as young as 11 years was recently charged with this offence, but nobody's been killed by the state. Why? These people who have been killed, they're released. Their arrest and the charges against them are announced, they're made public, and then they're released, very often to a baying mob. And they can end up being murdered, as is often the case. And I've wondered why this happens seemingly every time. So this is clearly intended to happen. This is how it was intended to happen. This is the model, to inure the public to murdering so-called blasphemers in the street in a most brutal way, but doing it in the context of a mob. And I started to wonder, what is the danger of this being exported, this model? Is there a possibility of this being exported? Well, yeah. Very recently, just 12 days ago actually, a young student, her name is Deborah Samuel. She was in Nigeria, a university student, and she had posted a message on a WhatsApp group, which was her class at university. And she just said, can we actually keep to the subject, to the curricular issues on this group, and not use it for Islamic statements? For that, she was hounded down, she was beaten to death, she was burnt, her body was burnt in the street. This is 12 days ago in Nigeria. She was burnt in the street, and the mob around her were filming this on their mobile phones. How sick can you get? Okay. Actually, two students, so this is very interesting, two students have been arrested for this killing. They've been charged with conspiracy and incitement. And if they're found guilty, they may face a 2-year jail sentence for this brutal murder. Is this an isolated case? No. You talked also about forced marriage. We know that this is a very, very big problem. It's estimated around 1,000 young women each year subject to this in Pakistan. On Sunday, just 2 days ago, 6 men were arrested in Pakistan. They had tortured and shot 2 young sisters. These 2 young sisters, now we're talking about how this ideology, this model can be exported. The 2 young sisters have been victims of forced marriage. They held Spanish nationality. 2 of the 6 men who had been arrested for this were cousins, and they had married these sisters. The sisters had refused to cooperate by helping them to get to Spain and obtaining EU passports. This is how it's going to be exported. Now, I'm very, very sorry for those sisters, but I'm very glad that these 2 chaps haven't got here yet. But this, I think, is how we may see a model exported. And maybe I'm only seeing what I've been looking for. Maybe I've just seen a couple of things that fit into my theory. I don't know what the panel think about this. But I would also like to make one point, which is I think, very important. The blasphemy laws are not the only way in which human rights are abused in Pakistan. There are a myriad of ways. It's almost like a textbook of how to abuse a society. And I asked the question, how does the EU respond to this? Well, the EU responds to this by rewarding Pakistan, by giving it GSP Plus status, which is a favourable trading nation status, which is received in 2014. And each year since that status has been granted, Pakistani exports to the EU have grown significantly every single year. The European Institute for Asian Studies, which is an EU-backed think tank, said in a recent report that the benefits of GSP Plus go not to the people, they don't trickle down, they go straight to the economic elites. April of last year, the European Parliament passed a resolution almost unanimously. I think maybe 8 people failed to pass it. If memory serves correct, 6 abstained and 2 voted against. The European Commission has not responded to this resolution, calling for suspension of GSP Plus. Well, a few weeks ago there was a short hearing in the Parliament to ask the Commission, why have you done nothing in a year? The Commission did not respond to any invitations, they did not even send some. I'd ask the panel, can you think why it is that, given all the evidence, the European Commission has failed to suspend GSP Plus? Pakistan is assured of this status now until 2024. I'm also concerned what happens in 2024. Will this be renewed? If the panel or anybody else can give me any idea of why the European Commission has failed to respond to an overwhelming European Parliament resolution, I would welcome your comments.
Thank you. It's also a great commentary and great question for the esteemed panelists. It is for you, sir. Please. Or it's for you.
I understand you're shocked, but you also know, Mr. Cartwright, that the European Parliament has no real power. Yeah?